Have we lost sight of what makes classic classic? Uh-oh.
Later this year, Classic WoW will turn 5 years old. Can you imagine
Damn.
going back to day one of its release and telling someone where the game will be out right now? Yeah, so turns out we are going to be playing Cataclysm Classic eventually. You'd get laughed at by many. Back then, everything was so heavily no changes. We want the original hardcore MMO experience. And then along comes TBC and Wrath and...
Well, Classic WoW did have some changes. Like, for example, it added raid frames, and it also added in 16 debuff slots instead of 8. So there were a lot of changes that happened in Classic WoW, but they weren't fundamental gameplay changes.
Well, here we are. Or in regards to the Season of Discovery, imagine telling a Feral Alliance Druid player back then, there will be a future where people are literally begging for you to join their raids.
Yeah,
you could have next
true.
to no gear and just auto-attacking cat form, but you have Wind Fury, so enjoy your permanent
Wild
raid spot.
strikes.
Or telling Shaman players there will be a time in the future when they are playing the most dominant class in the game.
It's that elemental shield
warriors
thing.
feel average in comparison. A lot's changed, that's for sure. What was that saying? You think you do, but you don't? We've even moved past that now, I feel like. We have had it, and now we want something else. Today's going to be a bit of a retrospective and thoughts type ramble video on the general state of the game as it currently stands on this big line going from Wrath to Cata, as well as seasonal servers, and of course the versions of WoW that most, but not all, have now left behind.
Yeah.
But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Boot.dev. Boot.dev is a platform that aims to...
By the way, I feel like Classic ended with Wrath. Like, it was... Classic WoW is not Cataclysm. Classic WoW is vanilla to Wrath.
You with the skills to forge a career in back-end development through interactive
I feel like
lessons
it's so
and
obvious,
learning.
right?
Where its unique is that it tracks progress and achievements, much like an RPG with goals, experience, and leaderboards. Boot.dev offers self-motivated individuals the tools to get fully on board with the Python and Go programming languages. It does this through hands-on learning, where you're going to be writing tons of your own code so that you can get a grasp of the fundamentals from the basics to more advanced lessons.
I wonder how much of this you could do with AI.
Content is free to view and watch in guest mode, and there's even a 30-day no questions asked refund policy. So even if you're just interested in
I bet you have to understand it in order to do it though, right?
Before you know if it's for you, there is very much an option to do that. Back-end development itself is a career with tons of potential, great earnings, often remote positions, and you can start working towards that today at your own pace. You can click the link in the description box and use my code WILLE to get 25% off your first payment for Boot.dev. That's 25% your first month or your first year, depending on the subscription that you choose. Many thanks to Boot.dev for the sponsor today. Let's get back to WoW. So I am a Cataclysm enjoyer. I've made a bunch of videos on the topic way before any thoughts of Cata Classic was ever possible. And even back...
Which, by the way, my opinion on Cataclysm is like, who asked?
Then they were on the positive side and received a lot of positive feedback.
Yeah.
But I also think it is where things start to noticeably change, and it's a time where WoW entered a new era, if you will. I've always put it like this: Vanilla and TBC and Wrath were the classics with their big talent trees, simpler gameplay, persistent old world, varied stats, and so on. Cata, Mr. Pandaria, and WoD were the progressive expansions. Blizzard had hit it big with this whole MMO thing, bigger than they would have ever imagined. And by 2010, when Cata dropped, WoW was over 6 years old. Time to do big updates to core aspects of the game, reworking talent trees, harder and more varied.
I feel like, I mean, they literally changed all of Azeroth completely. Cataclysm is totally different than any other version of the game. And not only that, but it changes everything that was previously in the game.
Read content, focus on collections, and trimming that which was deemed unnecessary out of the game. The third era of WoW comes along, and it's the most divisive one: the temporary power expansions, Legion, BFA, and Shadowlands. In these games, we have our class templates kind of done, basically, but we're going to be adding new stuff throughout the expansion to make them interesting. This started off fine in Legion. We were coming off the back of WoD, and people wanted more stuff to do in the game. And Legion, whatever you think about it, had stuff to do. But people...
There were a lot of things to do in Legion. For context, there was more content in Legion Archaeology than there was in every profession put together in Shadowlands.
Got very tired of this format by BFA, and in Shadowlands, yeah, people were absolutely done with it. Also, these expansions had a big focus on stuff to do to keep up.
Yep.
They wanted
World
you
quests,
to log in and do your
artifact
checklist.
power.
Then along comes Dragonflight. We've got big talent trees back again. Blizzard rein in the weekly and monthly upkeep stuff, lots more collection content, more varied endgame progression paths, and so on. And the War Within is the start of a trio of expansions, so we'll see how it builds on Dragonflight. But the point is, Cataclysm is definitely the first big shift in how WoW progressed, and as such people draw a line in the sand, and it is the end of Classic for them. I often read comments along the line of, I played Cata back in the day for a few months and it was bad, not gonna be playing that again.
I played Cata all the way through. I had a lot of fun playing the game, but it's not Classic WoW. And I think also a lot of the class design in Cataclysm was giving classes things that other classes already had. So like in Wrath, I feel like each class was kind of like finished from what the original plan was for it in Vanilla WoW. But in Cataclysm, I feel like, again, Philian, oh shit, thanks for the raid, Philian, I appreciate it. I'm talking about how good WoW was 10 years ago. Cataclysm was a fun expansion to play, but at the same time, it also wasn't classic. It just wasn't classic.
And, well, is it time to feel old yet? Because Cata released 14 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, perhaps after not having done something for 14 years, if you tried it again, you may have a different opinion.
Of course.
Really, the game changed significantly the moment when the Dark Portal opened. Expansions were the single biggest turning point in World of Warcraft's history. Before that, there was no concept.
I've got another unpopular opinion. I think that one of the MMOs to do expansions the best was New World. I think New World's implementation of its expansion, the Rise of the Angry Earth or whatever the fuck it was, I think that was the best implemented expansion into an MMO I've ever seen.
Of an old world.
There were dozens of people that liked it.
Everything was as it always had been. You'd have your maximum level players in Stormwind and Orgrimmar. Starting at level 1 would see you run into people all the time instead of just rushing to level cap to get to the current content. And honestly, there could have been a huge tornado in Westfall, and the Barons were split in two during TBC or Wrath, and I probably wouldn't have noticed because I just didn't have a reason to be there anymore. Expansion.
Yep, that's the thing, is that Blizzard went and they... Like, I think that, again, Classic WoW is the greatest MMO ever made. And in my opinion, I don't think anything even comes remotely close. I didn't play RuneScape a lot. So, like, there's a few of them I haven't played, but, like, I'm talking about in the context of the ones that I've played personally.
It's changed the old world a lot, but Cata came along and made it obvious.
Yeah.
And when the change became apparent, it was too much at once for many players.
It was.
And now I've replayed the original 3 expansions.
Well, it's also, like, you keep in mind that, like, Warcraft 3 was the main reason why a lot of people got into WoW, including myself. That's why World of Warcraft was so anticipated. It's because of Warcraft 3's success. So whenever you contextualize it around that, and then you remember that the main big enemy of Warcraft 3, the last fucking point of the game, was Arthas becoming the Lich King. So, of fucking course. And so, like, in World of Warcraft, you were dealing with, like, Nefarian, or you're dealing with Onyxia, and those are, like, just random bosses. And then Kel'Thuzad was in Warcraft 3. And then Cthulhu was kind of random, but other than that, like, I think Ragnaros was, like, mentioned in Warcraft 3, I don't remember even. But then Burning Crusade comes out, and it's Big Dick Illidan. Everybody knows Illidan because he was in Warcraft 3. It was a big deal. You played as Illidan. He was a demon hunter. He was one of the archetypes of the heroes. And then Arthas comes out, and at that point, everybody, like, as soon as they brought out Illidan, people knew what's after Illidan. Everybody knew what's after Illidan. So it was like, they announced Wrath of the Lich King, but everybody knew this shit was going to happen. And so Arthas gets announced, and you beat the Lich King, and at that point, you beat the game. That was the last, like, untied, you know, like, fucking loose end of Warcraft 3, was the Lich King. So it was kind of like the symbolic ending of the Warcraft 3 saga.
Way through, done every raid, leveled every class, and, you know, played the game a fair amount. It's vanilla, which is the version of the game that stands out the most because it is not an expansion. If Blizzard want to re-release, well, any expansion and call it classic, I mean, go for it. I've mentioned it in videos before, but people have started well at all points throughout its near 20-year history. Not every expansion may have had the same growth, but each will have its own merits that a certain amount of people will want to go back and see.
Of course.
Classic can really be anything that's re-released as it was back then, so people can go and see.
Just like what they're doing with the Mists of Pandaria stuff now.
How it was back then. Well, kind of anyways. This has been changing as Blizzard as well as the player base are getting more open to altering or adding to the current Classic expansion. I still reckon one day we're going to have Legion Classic too. And yes,
they are 100% going to do Legion Classic. It's not even a question. Absolutely, they're going to do it.
Means WoD Classic will exist too, and we'll just blast through it in about 12 months or so. We can choose the pacing of expansions now after all.
It's actually crazy how much better Kill Jaden was than Archimonde in terms of a character. Holy shit.
I guess. But as Classic goes forwards into Kata and beyond, at the same time, Vanilla has started to grow in a completely new way. You know, it's no coincidence that Season of Discovery happened when it did, just as Kata's about to come out. It keeps those more traditional Classic enjoyers with something to go and check out. And Season of Discovery has done very well so far.
Oh, fuck yeah.
You've probably seen the recent chart and sub-count estimates that have followed in its wake, and, well...
Like, I was playing last night, and I was just, like, randomly in some... I think I was going up to Fellwood because I was doing that quest for the wild spirit thing, and I must have run into, like, 30 or 40 people. And that was on, like, one layer going through one zone. There's a lot of people playing the game.
Of Discovery came out, sub-count line goes up.
It's popping off, yeah.
It just works.
The
There's clearly a huge demand for both vanilla content.
There it is. That's what it's all about.
As well as some changes being made to the game's base formats that people are really invested in. Season of Discovery has also showed us that the player base has definitely changed by and large on certain topics too. Nowadays we have mega servers that can fit tens of thousands of players, not these smaller tight-knit communities that people would always go on about back in the day.
I always hated that. I thought it was stupid. It was stupid back then. It's stupid now. I think that everybody, if it's possible, everybody should be on one server. And so do whatever you can to get as close to that as possible.
Out on an MMO that people just want other people to play with. We have gold that's much easier to get, and it's faster to level and so on.
Sure.
So some of these things do make sense given it's a seasonal server.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, it's not supposed to last forever. So of course they have to accelerate some things.
Of course, Phase 3's out now, raising the level cap to 50, and we'll see how this plays out. At this point, part of me does just want to get to 60 and see how our class's full toolkit is supposed to play with everything Blizzard's planned, rather than feeling as though some specs have bits missing, just so we have something to get later on. But then when we're 60, we have to go back to raiding Molten Core, Nixia, BWL, and so on. And the existing level 60 raids...
They're gonna massively rescale these. Because, so if you keep it in, like, think about the numbers. So Ragnaros has about 1 million health, right? Basically, every single boss in Sunken Temple has more health than that. And Ragnaros is a 40-man, and I know they said they're going to make MC a 20-man. But think about doing a 20-man, how easy it would be to do 1 million damage with 20 people in Season of Discovery at level 60. Especially if you can get buffs. Especially if you can get, like, the rallying cry of the Dragon Slayer and shit like that. Yeah, you're going to completely roll this shit over.
Being honest, were not my favourite. Maybe we'll get the Season of Mastery changes in the game, though, and they'll be a bit more interesting. I
think they should make the game a bit harder. They should retune things, but just make sure that you don't add too many mechanics. Because, again, I just think that Classic players... So, this happened again. Remember what I said about how the bosses were going to keep getting nerfed in Season of Discovery? Blizzard made another stealth nerf today to Sunken Temple. That's how bad it is. I think that, again, like, the people in, like, the WoW community and, like, that are talking about WoW and, like, WoW enthusiasts, they have such a completely disconnected view on what players actually are like. And what that's caused is it's caused so many people to be like hyper fixated around making the game hard. But the truth is that they don't realize how much of a minority they are. Man, that sucks. I thought it was fun having a hard raid. Well, yeah, but like it's not fun for a lot of people because it's too difficult. It's just too hard for them. That's all there is to it. It's just too hard.
Go either way. At Blizzard though, I bet they've got more than enough to do on the Classic team, between getting Cataclysm in a state where it's working, as well as developing new stuff for Season of Discovery, and actively having to work on things such as class balancing on a regular basis. I would still like to see a standalone Classic server that adds new content into the game one day. Season of Discovery,
I think they're going to do that after Season of Discovery. I think that they're using Season of Discovery as kind of like a testing ground in order to check to see how it's going to go. That's my guess.
It's definitely the closest we've got to a real Classic
and
Plus
then we'll get Classic Plus
so
after
far,
that.
and given its success, I expect to see more to come in terms of modified vanilla content. But changing that commitment from seasonal to permanent is a big undertaking, and not without its own risks either. On season,
and also, like, again, one of the big reasons why Kata fell off is because Kata was way too hard. Kata was crazy. It was so hard. Like, the dungeons were insanely hard. The raids were just like fucking just brutal hard. Yeah, people say get good. Well, yeah, that's the thing is like people always say that, oh, we'll just get good at the game. Well, people aren't going to get good at the game. They're just going to quit playing the game. That's just what happens. They're just going to stop playing. And then after you have enough people that stop playing, and it's also like, again, like the mind of a video gamer thinks that, oh, well, that makes you weak. But the mind of an HVAC certified electrician, let's say, he just wants to get home and play a game. It doesn't have anything to do with being strong or weak. It's a game. And if he tries to queue in to play the game and he can't meet a raid time because of his kids or his job, so he has to pug, and every time he pugs, you can only kill 2 bosses, and you can't make any progress because that's where all the best gear is, he's going to stop playing the game. And there's a lot of people like that.
Servers, they can massively increase XP gain, give us Wrath of the Lich King and beyond abilities, and just make us all feel overpowered. And it's not, in many cases, how the game usually is with the pacing of vanilla at all.
No, it's
but
not.
we can just brush it off and say, yeah, but it's seasonal, so whatever, just have fun with it while it's here. Would Season of Discovery have been as well received if it was presented as a full-on standalone Classic Plus server?
Probably not, no.
Maybe not.
That's a good point.
Another group
Very
of
good
players
point.
too, those who aren't on expansions, and those who don't really want all these changes to the original Classic format either.
Yeah, somebody says I work in construction, I just play the game to have fun, I just want to come home, turn my brain off and relax, not have a second job. Yeah, and I think that that's the way that a lot of people feel. They don't want to have to be committed to the game and like log on regularly, make sure you're focused on that shit. Like it's too much.
And those are the people still on Classic Era. In case you don't know, Classic Era were a bunch of servers made when vanilla was progressing onto TBC, and the idea was it was a place for people who prefer the vanilla version of the game to still have a home. And to this day, it's just vanilla that has received the Era treatment.
Perfect.
TBC did not get Era servers, and there appears to be no plans for Wrath either, and time is running out.
They will probably re-release a TBC server or re-release a Wrath server seasonally, but they'll probably do it in like a year or 2 years. It's just on cooldown right now.
At first glance, it's not hard to see why. Classic Era was a disaster when it first came out. The servers were dead, and not in an exaggerated sense either. They were dead.
No, I made videos about
There would be a handful of people online, if that. And auction houses at times had 0 items on. But it's grown over time. People have gone back to their old characters or sought to re-level in the old world.
You want to know whenever it started to grow again? Old War. I wonder why.
without any new additions. It's not a huge population, to be honest,
What a
but it
coincidence.
is consistent at least. And most importantly is that Era ended up serving its purpose,
It did.
being a home for those who want a no changes classic. It
It's
just
perfect.
took a while for people to start missing it enough. And you know what? Hardcore servers would have never happened if Classic Era didn't exist.
True.
By the time the hardcore scene started to get really popular, we were in Wrath of the Lich King. Would people still have wanted to go back and play a hardcore game mode on Wrath servers with all the class and open world changes?
It'd be too easy.
A few perhaps, but it was that legacy of having challenging vanilla leveling that made people want to go back and undertake the challenge. And hardcore ended up being a pretty huge deal for a good few months. There's still a scene for it, of course, it's not like it's ever too late to start. And one day it'll probably have a resurgence because
people will go back and play hardcore again in maybe 6 months or a year or something like that for sure.
it's just always going to be there. And I've seen the odd sentiment here and there start to crop up about people missing TBC as well now. We're getting to that point where time has now gone by, but unlike vanilla, they can't go back. TBC's gone. If a big piece of Classic is re-releasing and preserving older expansion experiences, why are we once again leaving them in the past? That doesn't quite add up to me. And Wrath is soon to get the same treatment in having no Era realms. By the way, Ice Crown Citadel
there is a Wrath Era realm. It's called Warmane.
Came out over 5 months ago and still has about 175,000 active raiders. If 10% of those people carried onto a Wrath Era server, it would have the same raiding population as Classic Era. And I don't know whether Blizzard doesn't want another
Wrath was huge at the beginning.
Hosting dead server situation, it being logistically difficult to offer different expansions or whatever it is. But it seems as only vanilla is the expansion, or version of the game I should say, that's carrying on and on. And no, I don't think segmenting the player base is an issue here. These Era servers are a niche thing to begin.
Every player base is segmented by a server. If there's another person on another server, they might as well not exist.
With. And for Blizzard, a sub is a sub. You might spend different amounts of time in different games doing different things, but somebody who subbed for Plunderstorm and somebody who raids Nax 40 on Classic Era, but somebody...
GDKP, 15 out of 85 bids start at 100 gold, equals split buyers and buyers. Whisper if you're a buyer or a pumper. If buyer, tell budget. Item level 50 plus buyer welcome. Doing fish boss, madness sold to 1k. Dude, that's just like I remember it, guys.
Who subbed for
Those were the days.
And somebody who raids Nax 40 on Classic Era are both subscribers. Overall though, despite me thinking as though the first 3 versions of WoW felt like a trilogy, keeping on releasing future expansions is kind of the point of Classic in the first place in many ways. I reckon we get to Legion eventually, but I'm sure there is a longer term plan, because at the end of the day, we're revisiting expansions at a faster pace than they're releasing.
We are.
And over time, I think we're gonna keep speeding up. Classic Era is an idea which I think works just eventually, and it's a bit of a shame to not see it for TBC or Wrath. I wouldn't play them personally. I mean, even for Classic Era, outside of Hardcore, I didn't really play it.
I think they should just do it seasonally. They should just add a new Wrath server or a new BC server, like announce it at next BlizzCon or something like that, you know?
There would be a niche player base for them. I hope Season of Discovery and Hardcore as an alternative game mode have both made big impressions on Blizzard. Vanilla is the game with the biggest reach by a huge amount. It's the only
MMO.
Expansion version of World of Warcraft, and as such we can add content which builds on what exists rather than releasing expansions and replacing everything. Though I am still hoping for something more permanent one day, but seasonal is a great testing grounds to see what works, and I've been super happy with it so far. I think given all the choices we have at the moment, Classic is doing just fine though, and outside of Era servers not existing for old expansions being a bit of a shame, the future of Classic is looking very interesting. But those are just my thoughts at the moment and a few bits and pieces which I felt like talking about today. If you made it to the end, let me know what you think about the overall state of Classic in the comments down below. And thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you on the next one very soon.
I'm gonna be honest, like, I think they need to just focus on making Classic as big of a game as possible. Because I think that's really where the future of WoW is. Because, again, think about how they had to nerf Sunken Temple this many times. Think about the fact that everybody started leaving Wrath whenever Ulduar came out. Do you think the WoW community could ever be what it once was whenever we were, like, young, 10, 15 years ago? No, I don't think so. I don't think WoW is ever going to be the same way as it used to be, but I do think that it can be a lot better than it is now, if that makes sense. Why keep shitting on Classic players so salty? Well, I'm right. If you look up their characters, you're going to see these people. These are people that are either playing the game. Like, there's two groups of WoW elitists, okay? The first group of WoW elitists, which is the largest, are people that don't play the game. So that's the first group of people that think that raids should be really hard and they should be really challenging and everything like that. The second group is people that play the game like a job. They play the game all the time. They clear the raid on 3 different characters a week, and they've been doing this for 15 years. Both groups of people have literally the worst benchmark for what people want that you could ever imagine. The Classic Andes are here. They suck, they love Classic, and they can't survive in retail. Yes, Classic Andes are garbage. They're garbage players. And if you think that they're not, watch hardcore WoW clips. They're terrible. Like, it's insane how bad they are. Like, it's crazy for me to imagine how bad they are. But there it is. More people play retail than Classic, though. Well, I mean, yeah, because they've developed retail for so much longer. And I think also, like, the fact that it's even close says a lot about retail, doesn't it? It's like they're getting outperformed almost by, like, a fucking 20-year-old game. Why do you think the Classic community is so toxic? I tried to join 3 different guilds with no luck because I didn't have experience, logs, and parses. So the reason why... Oh, let me link you guys the video real quick. Give it a like. This is very simple. Why is Classic WoW so toxic? It's because whenever you die, you lose your world buffs, you have to run back to the boss, and you lose your consumables. So the risk of failure in Classic WoW is extremely high versus retail WoW, where it's like in a raid, for example, like a heroic raid, it doesn't really matter because, like, and it kind of matters, but, like, not really, because you're not punished as much. So in general, it goes back to what I said about Lost Ark and other games like Mythic Plus, is that if you punish players, players will try harder to avoid being punished. That's all there is to it. So World of Warcraft, like Classic, has tons of, like, high punishment mechanics. So because it has high punishment mechanics, then very clearly you're going to have people that are trying very hard to avoid being punished. It's really just that simple. Time investment required just for entry, time investment for execution, and also parsing makes people really easily angry. Well, it's also that other people can affect your experience in a negative way. And I think that's the reason why WoW raiding got too hard. That's why something like the Mage Tower can be extremely complicated and super popular, but Mythic raids seem to be getting less participation all the time. Why is that happening? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because you can rely on yourself, but you can't rely on 19 other people. You can't rely on 39 other people. So whenever you put people in positions where they can have, like, for example, like the Sunken Temple raid that I did yesterday, I lost 2.5 hours of my life because people couldn't move. Like, they just couldn't move from getting hit by the dragon's tail. That is crazy. Sorry, man. Yeah, sure. But, like, all I'm really trying to get at is, like, that stuff. Like, for me, it's not a big deal, right? Because I can just play the game however long I want. I don't have a schedule. I don't have anything like that happening, right? But imagine, like, if you're a guy and you've got to go to work the next day. So now you've spent all this time in a raid, and now you can't kill the boss. It's taking this massive amount of time. And, again, now you can't finish the raid. You have to go to sleep. I think, again, Classic WoW is the only real MMO where things matter beyond, like, just hitting max level, and that's why people keep gravitating to it. Classic WoW was just an incredible game, and I'll play Cataclysm for sure, but it's not going to be like it was in Classic. So you're happy if WoW is now with how WoW is now, or not still? There are things that they have improved in WoW and things that they haven't. I mean, it's really not that complicated, is it? Yeah, I feel like it's pretty simple. There's some good things in the game and some bad things in the game. I mean, fuck. If I buy a game, then I buy a sub, then I buy an expansion, I would like something in return. Well, it's also that, like, people, and this is, again, the problem that happens, is that, like, the people that are talking about the game on, like, internet forums and stuff view not being able to accomplish something in the game as, like, some form of, like, personality flaw. They view it as, like, a personal shortcoming. Like, oh, you're not good enough as a person to be able to overcome this, you know, video game challenge. But it's just, it's weird. Like, what, like, nobody, like, people aren't really thinking like that in real life. And if you want to make a game successful, you can't make a game successful and cater to that type of an audience.